Hi there, welcome to IT Idiots episode 3. My name's Nikki.
I'm Sue-Faye.
And what we're looking at this week, Sue-Faye?
I thought it was going to be System Center Configuration Manager. Sorry.
It is. So we're episode 3 of our return, so not doing too bad. We got the server up and running last time, and that's all been whirring away quite nicely. Haven't done anything to it. And we started to show some System Center stuff and the F12 Pixie boot of a Windows 2008 deployment. And I thought the first thing we could perhaps do is look at Configuration Manager 2012. So this episode is just pretty much going to be a first look, a show and tell, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The idea is to just setting the scene for further much more technical episodes based on whatever we get feedback on. So that's pretty much it. So this is going to be Config Manager or System Center Configuration Manager 2012.
Which I know nothing about at the moment.
2007, do you know much about that?
No, did we ever do an episode on that?
We did thousands of episodes on that.
Maybe I know about it.
You
then.
edited them.
Oh.
So, there we go. So, Configuration Manager 2012. I don't know where to start on this because I haven't prepared any slides. I'm not going to, so we're just going to go straight into it and talk about what it does. So, with Configuration Manager 2012, lots of people assume it's a system to look after client machines, to look after Windows 7, Windows XP, whatever, to maintain them in terms of patching. If we want to roll out Office 2010 to it, we can use Configuration Manager. If there's a problem with it, Configuration Manager, or problem with the deployment, the Configuration Manager centralizes all that information. Also does a little bit of assets. We can find out exactly what software is on all the machines, what hardware we've got on all the machines. And it differs much from Operation Manager. Lots of people get it mixed up. Operation Manager is much more about server health. Is that server running well? Is Exchange working well? But both the products do cross over. So Operation Manager, you can look at the health of a Windows 7 machine if it was that important. With Configuration Manager, you can use it to patch servers, to roll out applications to servers. However, most of the time people are using this to deploy, Windows 7 and applications to client machines. So that's why it's considered to be a client tool. And that's probably why I might be sort of focusing a bit more on client deployment, because not really that many people use it for looking after servers and Macs.
But they're both part of the System Center suite? They're
all part of the System Center suite, yeah. So we've got Configuration Manager in there, we've got Ops Manager in there. Virtual Machine Manager is one you've seen very briefly on the last episode. We used it to migrate a virtual machine across. There's things like Orchestrator and Service Manager, which don't really warrant an explanation at the moment or even an introduction because they're big topics in their own right, and it'd be nice just to knock one on the head one by one before we get there. But yeah, the lab, they're all running, all ticking over nicely, and the thing which I want to get to is Orchestrator. And how's your PowerShell coming on, by the way?
I love it.
Have you done any work on it?
Yes.
Someone told me to watch a video on, there was a Microsoft video, apparently it's a great starting one. Can't remember.
I've not watched any. I've just, hijacked other people's scripts and tried to figure it out. I'm getting there. But I love it because it's just powerful.
No, I'm still managing to survive with very limited knowledge on it. Very limited. And my limited knowledge is just Control-C, Control-V. That's pretty much it. Okay, Configuration Manager. So some of you probably worked on 2007 or seen 2007 before. If you have, you probably had a look at the 2012 beta or something. If you haven't, the first thing you'll notice with Configuration Manager is the interface has changed a lot. And this is the first few installs I've done on this. It was just really, where the hell's that configuration gone?
Looks
where
Outlook.
have they put it? It looks pretty much like Outlook, but what they've done is they've moved everything around and sort of divided it into these sort of 4 areas. So perhaps if we go through these 4 areas, that would be a nice intro. So if we go to Assets and Compliance, what we can see on here, if I go to Users, I can see all the user accounts in my Active Directory. And this is done just simply by Configuration Manager querying Active Directory. Okay. So why would this need to know about your users? Because you might want to deploy applications to users. So that's why it understands about users. We also got devices in here. So I've got, for example, my Hyper-V machines. So which is Hyper-V. Now for you guys, you might have thought we did the we installed that server last week. We actually installed it how long ago? Hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago.
An hour or so.
Basically a Kentucky ago. That's what we've done. So I can see already automatically, I haven't done anything. This is how brilliant the And I'm going to start calling it the IHQ lab, I think.
Okay.
This is how brilliant the lab is. So I can go to Start Resource Explorer, and we can have a look at the hardware on it. So desktop monitor, it's got...
I remember you mentioning in the last episode that you had a policy that installed the agents, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get this information.
Absolutely.
Just
yes.
checking.
So we can go through that. So memory wise, it's running 2000. It's got 16 gig of memory on there. Let's have a look at the processor. That'd be interesting. So processor. It's the CPU hash. That's not at all interesting to me. So I just wanted to find out what speed it was running at.
Oh, because it's your new server.
Yeah. So we've got max 3.3 it's running at the moment. So all that information, we can also have a look at what software's on. Excuse me, we can look at what software's on it. I can imagine there's probably nothing much on there at the moment. We've got the add remove programs right at the top. And if I browse down to the bottom, we can see the results of the software inventory. And this software inventory works by basically scanning the exes of headers. And in my experience, looks like, guys, we haven't got any results from this as yet. As I said, it was only a little while ago. Or maybe it's not enabled, I don't know. But that works by scanning the exe files. But most things nowadays, they register an add remove program, so you can, just look inside there. Now, when you're looking at the Resource Explorer, you're thinking about all of this data. It's all stored in a SQL database, so it does require a SQL Server. And anything we see here, we can run queries on, and we can target application installs at. So, for example, I can say, find out all the machines that are running Windows XP and they've got more than a particular amount of memory, they've got enough hard disk space, and we can push out a copy of Windows 7 to them. So we can do that automatically. So...
Yeah, I remember being asked to do some SQL queries this a couple of years ago, but I think the customer wanted, and this was against the System Center database, config manager maybe, where the users have logged on. So I think it captures that all in the database.
Yep.
And then with, very weird joins and all that, I'm going to produce a report. But yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of information inside SQL, and just to see if Faye's mentioned, sometimes you create your own ways of getting at that data, like SQL reports or, various different ways. So it's very, very flexible. So that's just looking at all my devices in there. If I go to device collections, what you can see here, this is just a way of, you can divide them up into all Windows 7 machines, all machines in finance, all finance 32-bit machines. And when you're thinking about collections, these are really how you can target application installs or delegate permissions. So what I've got down here is I've got one called Build and Capture, and there's nothing in there at the moment. And the reason I created this is because I wanted to target an operating system install to one machine.
Right.
So I created that collection, put the one machine in there, and away we go. So...
And you put the one machine in there via AD?
No, you do it via in here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all done in here. So if I just pop down to device, oh look, we've got an iPhone in here. So in the lab, this is Bob's iPhone. This is actually my iPhone. This one here.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob. And all I've done here in the lab is we've got Exchange running in here, and I've just set up because my iPhone it's connected to the wireless network in here, so it can see Exchange and I can test my Exchange email on the iPhone. And because we're running Exchange, System Center will connect across to Exchange. It's got a connector in it, and it will pull your device information into it. So what can you do with Bob's iPhone? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could install applications?
Right.
No, you can't. What you can do with it is very disappointing, to be honest, because if you think about it, it's you can't run inventory scans on an Apple device. You can't, or even Windows 7 or Android. They're all the same now, aren't they? They're all sort of sandboxed. So you can look at other ways of managing that mobile line, and that's maybe something we could look at in another episode. So that's all looking at devices. If we go moving down, user state migration, that's not interesting.
So I imagine the user collections is similar to device collections. You just group the different users.
Yeah. So what I could do is go to user collections, and I can create a new user collection called sales users. And the limiting collection is these sales users have got to be derived from this collection. So it's just something that's their parent collection. The next stop is you can say, how do you become a member of that collection? Actually, what's better if you do, let's just go and do a device collection. Let's go into device collections here, and let's create myself. Come on now, create device collection. Let's call Windows 7 machines. Now you used to get all of these default collections, operating system collections in there. You don't get any of that anymore, so you've got to create your own. So I want to create a Windows 7 collection because I want to roll out patches to Windows 7 machines, so that's my target point. And now we have to specify in this collection, how do you become a member of the collection? There's two ways. By direct membership rule, and that means you're adding them manually. And of course I don't want to be doing that. So I'm going to do it by running the results of a query. So this is very much a show and tell podcast, so I'm not going to go too much into this, otherwise we'll be here all day. And we've got half Kentucky to eat. A query for Win 7 machines. So I'm going to create myself a new query. And knowledge of this query statement is, if you've been looking at the resources in Resource Explorer, you'll get to know these attribute classes. Like, for example, I know that operating system is inside a class called system resource. So if I go inside here, the attribute is, stop making noise.
Sorry.
Operating system name and version. Go to OK. Now, if I go to values, these are all the possible values I've got inside my database.
Oh, so you don't actually have to know them off the top of your head.
No, because
it helps you out.
You would have guessed it, wouldn't you? So that's Windows 7, isn't it? Well, look, what's that? Windows 8.
Oh.
We've even got that in IHQ Lab. Right, so be OK on that one. Click on OK. Click on Next. Sorry, let's zoom out so you guys can see that properly. And now when I go inside my device collections, I can see all Windows 7 machines. And they're in there. Now the nice thing about that is, if you were targeting, let's say, Office 2010 to that, all you would have to do is literally, although I've got it at the moment, you can F12, boot up a Windows 7 machine, it automatically installs the agent, it will automatically go inside that collection and it'll get Office 2010. So, pretty cool, eh?
Right.
So that's the kind of thing you can do with configuration managing kinds of the collections, how you group together these machines. So I'm just going to scoot down and go through user state migration just very, very briefly. One of the great things you can do with Configuration Manager, lots of people want to move from Windows XP to Windows 7. If you're running Windows XP, you've probably got lots of data everywhere, all fairly nasty because you didn't manage it properly. So in Windows 7, of course, you've created a nice group policy, so it's never going to happen. But to get that data to Windows 7, Config Manager will use user state migration, just USMT really. It scans the XP machine, picks up all that data and user state across, and puts it back on a Windows 7 machine.
Even if it's not in its in a location like My Documents and stuff like that.
You configure the SMT to scan, and you have to on the projects I've been involved in. You can't just say look in My Documents, because otherwise the managing director would say I saved it in my Windows directory because I'm using Windows. that kind of thing. So you've got to do a little bit of scanning on there. So it will scan that and it'll pick all that sort of state migration point and then put it straight back where it found it. Now the trouble with that is you're going to have a group policy that won't let you do that. So you need to, USMT is a little bit more complex than that. You've got to scan it, think about where you want to put it, and maybe script it. So I haven't configured that, and that's something we can have a look at later. Asset intelligence is just a way it synchronizes with a Microsoft service, and it pulls up information about what applications are out there. I'll go into antiviral, the kind of requirements on those.
Seems to me the databases for this can get pretty large.
They can. And at the moment, there's no sizing information from Microsoft on how to size this because it's so new.
Right.
So just finger in the air. Not doing my career any good here at all, am I? So asset intelligence, it's a very disappointing part. That's all I'm going to say at the moment. It's not a full asset management system. Let's move down to software metering. Software metering, we've got full-on software inventory, and that shows you what you've got. If you're doing an XP to Windows migration project, the first question I've got is what applications are you running Windows XP? Because we want to package them up for Windows 7. Now the customer might come back, or you might come back and say, I've got 300 apps, and I'm thinking, well, how many of those do you actually use? So software metering is a way of finding out which apps are actually in use at the moment. So that's kind of nice.
Is that at an organization level, or?
Yep.
So it's not this particular machine.
No, this will show, at the moment, what this is showing is all the information from all the clients. So as long as the clients are pushed out everywhere, then you'll get all that information in on here.
Okay.
Compliance settings, what we can do is we can check the compliance of a machine based on what's called configuration packs downloadable from Microsoft. They check on things like installation of SQL servers, various compliance like that. Again, I'm going to scoot over that because, to be honest, not many people use that too much at the moment. Okay, so towards the bottom, what we've got is endpoint protection. One of the nice things you've got in Config Manager is you've got endpoint protection built into it, which is virus checking.
Okay.
So single agent, we've pushed that all out. Again, the server installed this morning, that will be fully protected with, we'll have a virus checker on now, which in the lab is kind of questionable whether I can spare that resource or not. So really nice. If I go to anti-malware policies, just to show you the kind of granularity we've got, let's just have a look. So probably what I want to do in here is turn off things like real-time scanning. So I've got daily scanning on there.
Is this for any antivirus software?
No, this is for just endpoint protection.
Okay.
So you can see some of the huge benefits you've got of, just going down the Microsoft route.
Right.
So real-time protection is on. So I'm actually going to switch that off, I think. In the lab, save some resources. And that's it really. So that's looking down the asset and compliance. So that's very much what you can do, after the site's been installed. Now, what I'm going to do next, just pop into the administration just to understand a little bit about the hierarchy and how we got this far. So if I go down to administration, if we go from the top, we've got, first of all, is a hierarchy configuration. So I'm just going to click on discovery. We'll talk about this. So if you've once you've installed Configuration Manager 2012 for the first time, it knows nothing. So it needs to start discovering about these resources. So on the right hand side, what you can see is a list of all the discovery types. So if we go to Active Directory Forest Discovery, I've enabled that, and it's going to update every 1 week from the discovery. Now, from here, what's new is we've got this thing, automatically create Active Directory site boundaries that are discovered and automatically create IP addresses. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that when we look at boundaries, because you used to have to do that manually before. The next thing we've got, when we saw a list of users, that's because I've enabled user discovery. So look at the polling schedule. Again, not rocket science really. So laid in front of this, you can probably work yourself around it. It's just finding out where the configuration actually is. System discovery, we've enabled that. Polling schedule, how frequently am I doing that? So every 5 minutes, so you can understand why it discovered that machine so quickly. We just need to add it to the domain and it would have discovered it. So that's looking at the discovery. So you install your site, you need to set up some kind of discovery. The next thing you've got to have is some boundaries. And the boundaries are, if you're inside the boundary, you can be managed. And a boundary, I've just mapped it to the Active Directory sites. So I've only got one site, my lab default first site. I've created a boundary called Active Directory site. And when I go to site systems, I can see I've got my site server in there. So anyone, go to boundary groups. I've also created a boundary group called default boundary group. Now what a boundary group does is it ties together boundaries and site systems. So it's, if you've got, say, a presence in every country in the world, you create a boundary of UK, you create a boundary group of UK as well, possibly, and then you would put all the distribution points that people in the UK can use inside that boundary group. Not explained very well. But...
So then, would you have a Europe boundary group?
Yeah.
And then a global boundary group?
Yeah, it's just a way of getting clients to go to local site servers. So if you've got distribution points all the way,
Oh,
they use their
okay.
boundary and say, I'm in this boundary, therefore I can use resources in this boundary group. And in that boundary group, you have distribution points, update points, etc.
Okay.
So I've got some boundary groups in there. Exchange server connectors. This is just a connector that pulled information from my iPhone. So there's no configuration really on that one. The addresses is to do with having multiple sites. And again, we can talk about multiple sites in a later episode, but I haven't got multiple sites. It's just the one site on here, so there's nothing underneath there. And Active Directory Forest, this is all done from Discovery. So this is all pulled from Discovery. Moving down next, if we look at client settings, so any client in my environment or in the lab, what it's going to do is we've got things like the client's going to check for new policy, i.e. changes to the policy settings. For example, you might want to run hardware inventory. If we go down onto here, you can see hardware inventory is run. Catch up lab. Oh, it's run every hardware inventory schedule occurs every 7 days. So if I change that, maybe I want to run it every 2 days. The client won't actually find out about that until it polls every 60 minutes. Stop looking at the cat. The cat's licking if you want to hear that noise. Licking and scratching.
It's licking the couch.
Bizarre. Okay, so that's hardware inventory. Anything else exciting down on here? Again, it takes control of the power management to the level of it will tell me how much units I'm using in terms of kilowatt hours. So really quite useful on that. We can remote control our clients, and that's all the remote control agents.
Going back to power management, is it allowing you to control the power management settings of the...
Yeah.
So in what scenario would you use this over group policy?
You could use a group policy as well, but in here, the problem you always get with power management settings are that it never works. I do a lot of work in hospitals. It never works for people doing presentations.
Okay.
Always problems with people in presentations because it locks the screensaver on and presentation mode doesn't seem to work as advertised by Microsoft. So you have to do lots of exceptions. On this, you can have this. If you go into the control panel, you can give users the ability to opt out of power management settings.
Okay.
So that could be one reason. But the honest truth is, this is quite a new product to me, so I'm yet to know how people are going to use this. And so far, it's just been enabled, in my experience. So, anything else exciting down here? Software inventory. How often we're running software inventory? Every 7 days. Software metering is enabled. This is all defaults down here, guys. All defaults. Software updates. So some of you might be using WSUS to control your software updates. Pretty good. Config Manager, this tool can do all of that for you. And really it's about trying to give you a single pane of glass for everything. I can run apps here, I can control virus checking here, I can also do software updates from here. So we'll take a look at the software updates in a second. So I think, let me go into this one. One of the newest settings or the newest concepts in Config Manager is the change really of pushing out applications to users rather than systems. So with Windows XP and Config Manager 2007, we're always deploying to systems. Whereas on this, we can deploy to users because they realise the world's changed now and users log on, and wherever they log on to, whether it be a terminal server, whether it be a Citrix session, whether it be a real client, a thin client, they want that app. So in Configuration Manager, when you define an application, for example, Adobe, you define Adobe Reader and you would say, here's a FAT install and give it an MSI install. Here's an app V install, give it an application virtualization install. And you can also say, if they're logging via an RDP, we better stream to that, use app V as well. So you have different deployment types per application, and depending on what device the user's logging onto will determine what type of install they've got. So if a user's got their main machine, and it will work out their main machine automatically based on the amount of logons they're doing to it, you can also say, I'm going to allow users to say, this is my main machine, and that will dictate how applications are going to get pushed down to them. So that's really nice. So lots of new settings down on the client agents. The other change you've got here is, notice that we've got default client settings. You can only have client settings per site in Config Manager 2000. Oh no, you can do it per collection to a certain extent. So I'm a little bit wrong here. It's done in a better way. So moving on from that, security is just people who've got ability to control different parts of configuration manager. The big changes now is it's all role-based, whereas before you had to do it all manually. So you had to understand if you wanted someone to roll out an application author, they needed to be able to create a package, create an advert, create a program.
So granular permissions.
Much more granular, yeah.
Right.
So that's moving down onto that. So I'm going to skip through there. Okay, let's move over to or just close hierarchy configuration. Let's move on to site configuration. So I'm going to go to the property of the site. Okay, wake on land, so it can use wake on land. If you're running at software updates and target it at 7 o'clock in the morning, it will do a wake on land packet to that.
Are these sites Active Directory sites or system config manager?
When I'm referring to sites, I mean config manager sites.
Right. So it doesn't pick up.
Most people's sites largely follow their geographic sites as well. However, now most things are single site. Like the largest site I've been involved on is, well, I won't say the largest one. I've done just recently done a 5,000 user site. It's been one site, single site. Yeah, 8,000 was two sites. Nothing too much exciting going on there, so I will move on from that. And again, what I'm trying to do is just give you a feel for how the thing is set up. So all you understand is you install it, you set up a discovery type, so it discovers resources. The next thing you probably want to do is choose how clients are installed. So if I go to client installation settings, let's have a look in here. I've got client push installation, that's enabled. It's enabled to servers and workstations, and site systems is not enabled. If we look at accounts, it's going to use this account to push the installation. Not good using a domain name and account, really, not good practice, but finding this in this situation. So when I added my new server into it, it would have been discovered in 5 minutes, and then client push would have pushed it as I've got it as a server. It would have connected to the admin share using this account and run it across. And from that point, it would run the inventory, hardware, and I'll be able to remote control and do anything to that now.
If you don't use a domain admin account, what sort of rights does it need?
It does need to be an administrator of the client machines. Okay. So the customer I'm working at the moment, what we're doing is we're creating a group policy preference, we're creating a new account and using group policies to insert it in the local administrators group of the client machines and do that. Lots of people use domain admins.
That's just the easy way out, isn't it?
It's easy, yeah. Right, so that's looking at a little bit on the administration side. If I look at servers, when you have a configuration manager site, these things are massive sites and get quite complex. And already you can see I've got two servers, a SQL server, and I've got my main site server, and it's hosting all of these roles. All of these could, in effect, be an individual server. So the only thing we really need, and the only thing I'm going to chat about, is the site server, a management point. The management point is what clients communicate with. For example, they're passing up the inventory, I run an inventory, I send it to the management point. I want to find out if there's any applications, I query the management point. So it's a real fundamental service, and the management point chats to the site server. The only other thing I've got configured on this site is our distribution point that I've done any kind of manual configuration. We can see the distribution points now use HTTP or HTTPS. Got that.
What was it before?
They could use SMB, and they could use HTTP or HTTPS as well. So inside here I've got Pixie support, so that's the thing that if I bring a new machine into my environment, F12 boot it, it will boot up and install server, which is what we saw on the last episode. So just wanted to stop at that point because this is a big change. You used to have to get involved with Windows deployment services, and again you had another console to manage. So far I've done about 4 sites installed, all using Pixie. All I've done on all those sites is just tick those boxes, and it's worked. And if it doesn't work,
so if you're a customer, you're paying too much.
No, I don't lie about what I'm doing, because if it doesn't work,
I'm kidding.
I know. The main thing that is, if Pixie doesn't work, it's almost always a networking issue with routers not forwarding it, etc. Okay, so that's a little bit on the distribution point pixie. Right, software library next. Okay, so looking at the software library, this is another huge area where they've just, I suppose, just put it all in one area. So you've got your software library, you've got operating systems, you've got software updates, and you've got any applications that you define. They're all defined in this single pane. So if I go into applications, I can see I've got a few applications on there, 7-Zip, Adobe, and Shockwave Player. And when we look at deployments, and let's look at deployment types. 7-Zip, I've only got one deployment type, it's an MSI install. So in a real lab, and this is something we'll work up to, is we're getting AppV installed in there, so you'll see the multiple deployment types.
Is AppV part of the System Center suite?
The distribution points can stream AppV packages, but the license to use AppV on the clients, there's lots of licenses on AppV, but the license to install it on a Windows 7 client is part of Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, which is a subscription-based service, which is ridiculous because it should be wide open, really, because it is the future, and it just means if you're a 500 user company, you've got to go on a subscription service together. I'm sure it's going to change.
So this particular window we're looking at,
Yep.
does that require AppV?
No.
No, okay.
No, because AppV, really what AppV is a client. That's what AppV is, and you need a delivery mechanism, which was a web server or a config man distribution point.
So this just installs it. Okay.
Yeah. If we go to deployments, let's have a look at 7-Zip. And I've got a deployment going to all systems and all users. That's a bit overkill. Don't need to go to all systems really and all users. Let's have a look what I've done on this. Yeah, so I'm pushing these out to all users. So every single user who logs on should be able to see all of those apps. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flick over to a Windows 7 machine and just show you something else. So on this Windows 7 machine, it's just a config manager client. And if I go to all programs, every configuration manager client has got this new program group called Software Center. And inside Software Center, what you'll be able to see is all the applications. I'm not quite sure why not all of them are showing at the moment. You'll be able to see all the applications that are available to that user. And the user could say, you know what, Adobe, I could do with that. Let's.
So the end user will actually have access to this.
Yeah. And they can just click on install, and you can see it's downloading from the distribution point, installing.
See, what's interesting to me is after deployment of this, how do you communicate with the users, or rather educate the users to say, if you want this, this is how you do it?
Well, if you want an application,
yeah,
there's got to be some kind of user training. And what I'm seeing is Config Manager 2012 is introduced, and I always refer to it as part of the new world. You know, and I say, well, do you need to worry about Windows XP? Let's leave that behind and sell it as in Windows 7. This is how you operate, and you've got a portal in Windows 7, and you can do this in Windows 7. So, yeah, it's a good point. These things do need to be educated, or you need to use education on this. So, it is installing. Trust me.
Because I can see lots of organisations rolling this out and then not really telling users they can do this. It's a bit of a waste, I think.
It really does depend on how the organisation works. Some people just wouldn't want to do this. They wouldn't want to give the users freedom to do this kind of thing, because now the argument is, oh, users got applications that, you know, is scattered. Well, remember, Config Manager's logging this. It's inventorying this. So you have got all this information. So we can see that's installed now. Adobe, you saw the shortcut on the desktop anyway. And Paul made a mistake. Let's uninstall it. Great fun, eh? So it's removed the software. Now you can also put, when you advertise these applications out, I can also specify that you need to have approval for this. In which case the user would say request install, and the config manager administrator in the console will see all the requests coming through and they can approve it. So that might be so they can tick a box on a license tracking thing or something.
Okay. But they can only see what's available to them. It's only what the administrator have said.
Yeah. It's what you've basically advertised out. So that's something new on the client side. Oh, the other thing is this is available as a web page as well. So could be a workgroup client if I just go to config manager application portal. The other ones aren't out. I'm not quite sure why they're not showing. So I'll just install that and pretend.
Oh wow, from the browser.
Now, people get excited about this.
I am.
Yeah. And then I point out well, who are you actually going to deploy these applications to? Users. Users have got config manager agents. Well, you know, you have got this program item in here. Everyone's got this.
Yeah, but see, that to me, that's what I was worried about with the education.
I
Whereas
suppose
if it's
you could
web-based,
tie that up into
it's
some
a
kind
link
of
from your intranet. Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah.
You look stupid. Right, so that's just a little bit in the client.
Can I ask a question? I can edit it out if it's not relevant. Way back when, I think it's the 2007 days.
That's some bongo, isn't it? Way back when in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah. I was asked by one of our esteemed ex-colleagues to kind of write this Active Directory web browser tool where it kind of, because from what I understand, your membership is Active Directory driven. So if you wanted certain applications, you had to be part of certain Active Directory groups. And therefore, there was no way to empower the user to say, subscribe me to this group. So what I did was write a little app that they then said, oh, okay, I want to be part of Adobe Reader group. And then, you know, in the back end, I'll just put them into that group in Active Directory. Is that available now?
We don't need it now, do you?
Well, so it's kind of used that takes over. So
yes,
that's good.
So you've got the best thing is you don't have to rely on crappily written code by third party people, right?
Third party.
Okay, yeah, that didn't go too well, did it? Right, let's move back to software library. Just scooting over that bit. So that's down onto the application side, and this is new. The concept of an application and deployment types. If you want to live in the old world, you still got packages and programs and adverts. So that's very much the same as 2007. Okay. The next thing we've got down here is all the software updates. So I've also got a software update point whose job is to synchronize with the Microsoft catalog and just to tell me how many updates my machines need. How many updates are needed. So let's go to all software updates. We'll be able to see all the catalog. Very similar to WSUS. What it will show you is how many people got it installed, how many people need it. So if I just sort by required, you can see I've got quite a lot of required down on there. And we've got.
What do you mean by required?
It means they've run a scan and they should have it, but it's missing onto that. And do you know what these two are? Those two are the two new machines. So one of them is going to be my Hyper-V machine, and the other one will be there. Honestly, so what I've done.
I thought it got pushed down automatically.
It will do in time, but it will take a little while for the software update. So you can see this one's only seeing one on there. So what I've got is these are all the software updates, and how you control this. You create a software update group. So I've created a software update group called Baseline Updates, and I'll tell you how I use Baseline Updates. So I could do every week, and you can use searches to define all of this, but I'm just going to give you an example. I can say that there's two required there, two installed. It's those, the top two notice are not downloaded, they're not deployed, so these two must be new. It's probably because I got a Windows XP machine joined to it recently, and it scanned those. Yeah, got to remember those. So I can just say download that. I'm going to download it into a package I've created earlier called Baseline Updates. Download now. Hopefully that won't take too long.
Oh, so this is sort of a manual process that system administrators have to do to make sure that package is up to date to be rolled out.
But certainly how it used to work in 2007, this would be the only way, but you don't have to work that way anymore. So, because some people like manually doing these things.
Yeah.
You know,
because just in case a patch isn't stable.
Yeah, I don't want to roll out all critical updates just like that. So I've got those two. I've downloaded them, and the next thing I do is I just right click on them again, and say edit membership, and I put them inside. Are those the same two? They're not the same two. I think the top two were deployed no, weren't they? Because well, the next thing you would do, maybe if my console was updating, but this is a first look, so stop moaning. The next thing to the audience.
Oh.
The next thing is we would just say edit membership when I put them inside the baseline update group, and that baseline update group, when I look down on here, I've got deployments going down to all systems. Okay, and so that's the way it works. So just download, approve it. Now, because I'm running Forefront Endpoint Protection, well, there's loads of updates on that. There's virus updates all the time. So what you do have new is auto approval. And how I've set up this auto approval is, let's just go to properties. Let's not go to properties. Download randomization. Let's see if we've got any more updates. No, it's down the bottom in the wrong area. Here's my endpoint protection auto update. So all this is a query, and if we go to software updates, we can see the queries. The date required is released within the last 1 month. The product is endpoint protection, and the classification is definition updates. So if it fulfills those, it will automatically download those and place them inside this. If we go to the software update groups, puts them inside that auto approve package, and that's deployed to all systems as well. So you can see maybe what I could do here to be a bit cleaner would be create a collection called Forefront Endpoint Protection, then base that on a query of people who've actually got it installed, because at the moment this is pushing out to everyone.
Right.
But in my lab, everyone's got it.
And you can check your spelling too.
Yeah, well, a lot of this is really late night stuff, and it's going to be So O's and P's are my favourite. Get those ones mixed up. So that's all good stuff, and I'm quite surprised at how healthy it is in terms of my updates. Look at that, not bad.
Out of how many machines?
If you look at that one, 17. I've got 17.
So what's the largest deployment you've done?
About 8,000, which is not huge. Well, I've done a design for 15,000, but
must be very satisfying to push out all these.
It's nice pushing out the clients. I do like pushing out the clients, because all you're doing is sitting looking at the log file, looking for errors, looking for anything that's going wrong in there. So that's software updates. The next stuff is personal. Reason why again, all the customers I've been dealing with, this is one of the main reasons they want System Center for, and that's pushing out Windows 7. So they see System Center as, okay, we're doing things a bit wrong maybe in XP. System Center is not only a mechanism for pushing out a new Windows 7, but also for maintaining it, for making sure it's updated, and I've put application control here. So I'm going to scoot through and show you how easy this was to set up. So all I've done inside operating system installers, I've imported 3 applications, or 3 sets of source files. So Windows 2008 R2, Windows 7 Enterprise, Windows XP.
And these are the binaries?
These are just the binaries,
okay.
So there's nothing complex in those. So you have to put the installers. Now, Config Manager, the way it installs an image, a WIM file. And that's the Microsoft WIM file. Now, the installers, they're not WIM files. So you've got to create a WIM file from that. So what you do is you import these source files here, and then you go to task sequences. And a task sequence, just think of it as a batch file. A task sequence, what it will do is, in this case, I've got what's called build and capture task sequences. The job of this is to install the operating system and then capture it.
Okay.
So you would have to do this once. It's a little bit of a pain, and I do kind of think and scratch my head sometimes and think, wouldn't it be good if they were deployment images to start with? Maybe they will be. You can't import the WIM file from the CD, incidentally. Or you can, but you won't get very far. Right, so if I go to my task sequences, let's create a new one. Let's see how I actually did this. So I want to build and capture this new machine. Create task sequence. So this is going to be to build and capture an operating system. So click on next. Just call it task sequence 1 and the boot image. Now the way this will work is the machine boots up into Windows PE and that controls the installation. So I'm going to use let's do Windows. I think I'm on 64-bit, so depending on the version of Windows 7 you're using. So I'm 64-bit. Click on next. The operating system I want to deploy. So Windows 7, that'd be the package, the product key, don't care at the moment, and the password, I'll just tap in the password. And again, all this is doing is installing it and capturing it. Sorry, installing it, sysprepping and capturing it. So inside, it just needs to be a member of a work group. You can't make it a member of a domain to sysprep, not supported. And I've got to specify what the config manager client package is, because all the Windows 7 machines must have the configuration manager agent in it. You might have noticed that package was defined earlier. Now this is quite good, because if I'm going to deploy out Windows 7, I don't just want to roll out Windows 7 and capture it and then use that to push out, because that's not going to be up to date. So what we can do in the task sequence, I can say, push out Windows 7, update it all, and then capture it. Right. And that just makes your installation, your deployment process a lot more streamlined. But what about Office? You can also, under Applications, say, also, do you know what? I want every single person to have, pretend that was Office. And now what it will do is it will install Windows 7, install all the updates, install Adobe, capture that, and then you've got a deployment image. So it's a bit like deploying a fat image with all the apps in it, but you've got a mechanism for keeping this up to date. So, click on next. Sysprep's part of the OS, so you don't need to worry about anything with Sysprep. The next off is the name of the image, where you're going to capture it to, so you can just put a UNC path in there, and the account you're going to connect up to.
Okay, because this is a one-time...
It's a one-time thing, yeah. So, just go through that. And if I just have a look at my Windows 7 build and capture one for argument's sake, let's edit this. And you can see capture the reference machine, and it's just capturing it across to that as a WIN file. Okay, good. Now, if you guys are using virtualization, we've got the distribution point in place, we've got the Pixie point in place. This is probably worth showing you. And to do that, what we're going to do is I'm going to need to quickly remote onto a different machine. So,
what machine are you on now?
So I've got to another server. So the idea now is I just want to show you the build and capture. So what I do is I create a new virtual machine. Just is very, very quickly. Don't really care too much about the settings, but we'll give it some memory, connect it to a network, happy with that. But the difference I'm going to do next is say, once it catches up with me, is say this is going to be installed from a network installation server. And what this means is it's going to set up certain boots from Pixie. Okay. So if we just connect to this one and start it up. Get ready to hit F12.
I'm leaving that in there.
So, function is what I was looking for. The trouble is, if I hit F12, that's what F12 is. Shouldn't use a Mac, they just cause your life so much effort.
And I am going to keep that statement for evermore.
There you go, F12, function F12. So it's downloading from the Pixie server now, so this could be a brand new machine, but all this is doing is build and capturing. But this is the same process you would use on a build with the real image. I won't...
Oh, so it's actually capturing everything you're doing here?
No. All this is doing is building it, and it's like taking, I shouldn't use ghost, that word anymore. It's almost like taking a ghost image of that. So it's just building, sysprepping, and capture.
But all the regional settings and everything, that's what it'll take.
It would take all of those, but you can change those later on as well in the deployment.
Right.
So when I create the image, when I create the reference, I'm not too worried about the keyboard settings.
Right.
Dave told me that.
Well, I suppose because you might want to use one image for several regions.
Yeah. Okay, so I can choose Windows 7 build and capture. It was stomach. And away it goes. But I just wanted to show you how easy it can be. It's not even bother showing you or fast forwarding this because it will take some time to sort of build and capture back up. So we'll leave that. Actually, let's leave that running and let's go back to the config manager server, because the next thing you do with that image, you just import the image. So right click, that'd be very
From
similar.
that file location you specified.
Yeah. So that's
how large is it?
It's 2.2 gig. About 2.2.
Okay.
And if we go down into task sequences, the next thing we do is we say create a new task sequence to deploy the image and advertise that out. Do you want to see any further than that, or you get the gist?
I get the gist.
Get the gist from that. So the operating system deployment, the one thing I haven't shown you is the thing that's perhaps the most beneficial, and that's the drivers. What you can do is you import all your drivers into here. Unfortunately, I should have downloaded some drivers. Perhaps I can... No, I think I'll do this as part of a website article or something. But you import your drivers. So I'm working with a series of 25 Dell machines on this customer site. So I've downloaded the Dell driver pack. Right-click it, import it. So I've imported the drivers. And on the task sequence, I've said, oh yeah, can you look for drivers? Done. It works on all of those models. You know, because what happens when it boots up to Windows PE, the job of Windows PE is to query using WMI, the machine underneath, to say, well, what's the plug and play IDs of all of the hardware you've got? And then it can go to the config manager server, i.e. this, and it can pull them all down and install.
Okay, so only if it's relevant.
Yeah.
Because if you had an environment that was a mix of Lenovo's and Dell laptops.
Yeah, so your distribution point on here will be huge. You know, but when the server's building, when the client's building, it's clever enough to find out what it needs and only pull down what it needs.
Okay.
So.
And you don't have to put them in a collection or anything.
Nope.
Thank God.
No, you don't have to do that. When you get into large environments, you might want to separate out the driver packages into 32, 64 Lenovo desktops, because what you can do is make a self-contained, completely self-contained deployment made from a USB drive or USB key. So if I wanted to build, let's say, Lenovo machines with a USB key, I can make sure the Lenovo drivers are on there, maybe Office 2010 and all the relevant applications. But to put all the drivers, that driver pack from Dell for desktops, laptops, 32 and 64-bit, I think was 11 gig in total, so it's massive.
Yeah, but USB keys these days, I saw one for...
It's true.
Well, there was a 64 gig one I almost bought. £25.
Okay, so moving back to the operating system, so if I just go back to the image here, what's the problem with this image, this Windows 7 image?
You built it?
Well, the problem is I built it, let's say, 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So
and
it's out of date, isn't it?
Yeah.
So any machine I deploy from that image now, it's going to be out of date. So what could I do?
Just ask it to update from the internet.
Well, excuse me, update from the internet.
Oh, no, but you want to control it.
Yeah, what I want to do, I want to make sure that as soon as that's out, it's bang up to date. Now, in the deployment, under task sequences, let's have a look at how I'm deploying Windows 7. Oh, I've got, let's pretend it's Windows 2008. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to right click and go to edit. So on 2008, we've got apply device drivers. And what you could do in here is say, you know what? Also, what I want you to do is I want you to install all the updates. And what it will do is look at your update packages, which you've configured, and it will make sure that all that's updated. Now, I haven't done that. Why?
Because you're lazy?
You would have to do that before, really. Now, what you could do is say, I'm going to just run a rebuild and capture.
Right.
And if you rebuild the whole thing in your VM, so if you've got a nice little VM, just rebuild it, it does all the images, it does all the updates and recaptures it. And that's what you could do in 2007. But what you can do now, and you love this, is let's just close this down. You can go to the image. So look at this. Go to images. Here's my Windows 7 image. I can right click on it and I can say, let's schedule some updates to that image. Bear in mind it's offline. And here's
so this is updates to the image.
Yeah. So these are all the updates we've got from there. I can say next. Let's update that image as soon as possible. And now it does an offline update to that image.
From the software update.
From the software updates packages that I've already got. So if it's been approved, I've now right click, schedule that, and what that will do, we might see it start in a second. You can see it scheduled, whereas the bottom one's successful down there. But that's pretty amazing, eh? You know, it's so easy now to make sure that that Windows 7 image is bang up to date. And it's as simple as, you know, download an update, right click, schedule update. And you can see from here, you can schedule that thing to run on every week. Or you can schedule it to run, you know, at the end of the week. So when you do your update, download whenever, second batch Tuesday. So there's some really good stuff going on inside Config Manager 2012.
Well, all I can see is IT departments shrinking.
The trouble is user education is the problem again. And I'm not knocking IT departments, because the trouble is you always get is people don't give people enough training on it, because no one knows how to use this. A lot of the time people put it in and you know what they say? They say, you know what, I've got Config Manager 2007, I've put it in place, and do you know what the only thing they use it for? Their help desk can just about manage to go into devices and just say, I can start remote control, and pretty much they use it as a remote control agent.
You're joking?
No, and that's pretty much all they do, because they haven't got. Lots of people are scared about application deployment. What if it goes wrong?
Well, yes, because
you've got to do a lot of testing on this.
It's your job on the line sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, lots of companies got people whose role, or teams of people whose role is to package up applications, as you know. So yeah, it's a big task, but yeah, it's kind of sad in a way when you see companies not really using it well. Yeah. And that's how it gets a bad rap, and it's got a bad rap out there. SMS has. SMS has, yeah, but SMS 2003, and then they got better after that. 2007 wasn't bad, but I think it was just always misunderstood as something I've always said in other podcasts. So, monitoring next. If you want to find out the health and how this thing's working, it's all done in the monitoring tab. So I can have a look at my site status. Seems to be quite healthy at the moment. And go into component status. Everything's looking good.
What's the crossover between this and SCOM then? Or is there none?
What, the integration between the two?
Well, the two products, do they have any overlaps in functionality, or are they completely different?
Not really. So this is much more about keeping up to date and deploying out to ops managers, looking at the health and all of that. Service Manager ties both of those together.
Well, okay.
And yeah, we do Service Manager in its own right as well, so that sort of ties them together. But this is a product in its own right. So far, the only thing it's integrated with is Exchange. In this lab, it's only integrating with Exchange. And what is that giving me? It's giving me access to control the policies in this one interface, and that's about it, really. I'm not really chatting to anything else. Reports. I want to show you some of the reports. The reports are it's very easy to write queries inside Config Manager. You saw me write a query to find out all the Windows 7 machines. That was a query.
So you click a query?
No, I created it. I said system resource.
You write it, select all from... That's the old way, no? Does it support SQL queries if you have a custom one?
No, what the queries I created earlier is you can see the language of it, and I appreciate it was a GUI-based build, but that's in WQL, Windows Query Language.
Right.
And reporting, the HTML things is all SQL, pure SQL.
Right.
So if you want to write, well, let's have a look at these reports first. Let's have a look at...
so do you need reporting services installed then?
You do need SQL reporting services, yeah.
Gosh.
compliance, anything operating systems. Let's have a look at operating systems. Count of operating systems versions and service packs. It's using about 6 gig at the moment on dynamic memory.
Yeah, SQL will always take it up to the max, won't it?
So I've got 12 server 2008, so I can just click on those. I can find out what they all are.
Nice.
And yeah, there's lots of people, and you've been involved certainly in modifying the code behind this. But that's effectively what we've been doing is, creating these web reports. So there's loads of reports in here. I haven't really thought about what to show.
And these are all out of the box.
All out of the box, yeah. So a lot of time, if you have to create a custom one, you can normally start on one of these.
Bastardize.
Absolutely, just clone it and edit it all. Client status. Anything exciting here? I'm trying to think of something that would be really good and be a wow factor, but I can't think of anything.
And they're all real time.
It's all real time. The reports are based on what's stored in the SQL database, which is why you might want to think about running your inventory more frequently.
Right. Because it could be from 5 days ago.
Absolutely, yeah.
7. Okay.
Then all good. Right. Any questions?
No. Well, not yet.
What do you mean not yet? I've finished.
Oh.
I think that's probably enough. I think for a show and tell config manager.
It's a good overview.
It's a good overview because I'm constantly on the border of trying to delve down a little bit further without taking it too fast. But it gives you the idea. But if you haven't got a controlled environment, this is one way of getting yourself to a nice clean Windows 7 image and keeping on top of it as long as your users are educated to use it. Because what I have found a lot of the time, particularly in the NHS, who really enjoy working there, but they're so under-resourced a lot of the time. They put config manager in, and they look at software updates, for example, and say, "Oh, that's too complex," and it's not that intuitive compared with WSUS, and they're all straight back to WSUS, as a result of which. So, putting this in is cool, but someone needs to know how to use it then. Cool. Right. I've got nothing else, so let us know what you thought of the episode. If you want us to do more show and tells on the first one, not interested. If not, if you don't think it's any good, right? You're still watching. We've been talking an hour, so you've got yourself to blame. So I think until next time.
Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.